Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillahi rahmani rahim. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa. Wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina astafa. Amma ba'd. Fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. Bismillahi rahmani rahim. Wa rattilil Qur'ana tartila. Sadaqallahu al-azim. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. How's everyone doing? Good. Everyone looks more refreshed today than yesterday. Alhamdulillah. So, yesterday we talked about mostly introductory aspects, and amidst that, I had talked about the importance of Tajwid and also the importance of beautifying one's voice, but not at the cost of Tajwid, correct? That we're supposed to beautify our voice to the best of our ability, but not to forego the actual rules of Tajweed in order to make it sound better according to our own conditions, our own feelings and desires. So amidst that, I mentioned one hadith, زَيِّنُوا الْقُرْآنَ بِأَصْوَاتِكُمْ. I wanted to make one correction about that hadith. That hadith I mentioned was in Bukhari. It's not in Bukhari. It's in Ibn Majah. It's in An-Nasa'i and Abu Dawood. It's in these three sources. And the Sahabi who narrates this hadith is Bara ibn Azib. So I just wanted to get that clarified. It's not in Bukhari, it's in Nasa'i, Ibn Majah, and Abu Dawood, and it's related by the Sahabi Bara ibn Azib, radiyallahu an. So today I said we would go into a few more slides, and then after that we would go into the actual practical recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha and Surah Al-Nas. And we'll start with these slides, the types of mistakes. So again, Tajweed is something that's mandatory, but within the science of Tajweed, within the categorization of the mistakes that can be made, there are two types of mistakes. One is Lahan Jali, and the other is Lahan Khafi. Okay? So Lahan Jali is actually a major mistake. It's considered to be haram, and it results in a major sin. Okay? It results in a major sin, and is haram. So what type of mistakes are considered to be Lahan Jali? We'll get into that. The second type of mistake is Lahan Khafi. And Lahan Khafi is Makruh Tahrimi. It's a minor mistake. It results in a minor sin. Inshallah, we'll get into examples of that. So Lahan Jali. Should I move on? Next slide. So Lahan Jali, examples of Lahan Jali. So Lahan Jali, a major mistake occurs when you replace one letter with another. When you replace one letter with another. For example, instead of saying kul, you recite qul. And you can see how what a major difference occurs in the meaning of the word. Kul means to eat, qul means to say, right? So there's a major difference in meaning that comes about. Another example listed is Nasrun, eagle, versus Nasrun, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ. If you say إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ, you're saying that when the eagle of Allah comes. Na'udhu billah, right? Nasrullah is when the help and assistance of Allah comes. Another example, halaq and khalaq. Halaq means to shave, right? You'll often see this word halaq when you're in the discussion of Hajj, right? For ihram. Afterwards, to get out of ihram, you do halaq. And if you say khalaq, it refers to creation. If you take Surah Iqra Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq, okay? So usually, I don't know who makes this type of mistake, halaq and khalaq, but a mistake that sometimes is made is that instead of saying khalaq, a person says ghalaq. Because kha and ghain, they're very close in their makhraj. Their point of articulation is very similar. Right? It's actually from the same spot, except they have certain differences. So, if you recite Iqra Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq, it means read in the name of Allah who created. If you say Iqra Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq, it means read in the name of Allah, your Lord, who locked the door or shut the door. Okay, so it changes the meaning. It becomes very odd. Another example, if you continue in the surah, اقرأ بسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق. He is the one who created human beings from alaq, from a clot. Right? Alaq is a clot, like a blood clot. But if you don't pronounce the ayn correctly, and if you say خلق الإنسان من alaq instead of alaq, then alaq means brightness or radiance. So again, changes the meaning. Another example that you guys will come across a lot in the Quran is the difference between alim and alim. Alim and alim. Right? Inna Allah bi kulli shay'in alim. Indeed, Allah is all aware of everything. Alim is all knowing, all aware. Whereas alim is, the meaning of alim is very painful. Right? Very painful. So changes the meaning completely, and you can just tell from those examples why this would be considered a major mistake and hence a major sin. Another way by which lahan jali can occur is to add an extra letter. So this is a common mistake that's listed. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Instead you recite Alhamdulillahi. Alhamdulillahi. So when you say that, when you say Alhamdu, instead of shortening it to Alhamdu, you end up adding this waw. Right? The waw with the sukoon. So when you're adding a letter, it either becomes a different word or it becomes unintelligible speech. It doesn't mean anything, right? And then instead of saying Lillahi Rabbil Alameen, you say Lillahi Rabbil Alameen. Again, you're adding an extra letter, you're adding that ya. That would result in a major mistake. And by the way, these types of mistakes where you accidentally stretch it a little too much, it's hard to catch it on your own. It's very hard to catch these mistakes on your own. You have to go to a teacher, an expert reciter, and only he or she can then correct you. It's very hard to do this on your own. That's why our Islamic tradition has always been about a teacher and student, right? Student is always learning from a teacher. He's not learning on his own. Another way by which lahan jali can occur is to remove a letter. So, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. Lam yulad. Instead you recite lam yulad. You deleted which letter? The waw. Okay, so you deleted an entire letter from the kalam of Allah Azza wa Jal. Major mistake. Fourth mistake is when you mess up on the harakat. So harakat are the diacritical marks. The vowel, fatha, dhamma, kasra, and the sukoon, the jazm. So when someone messes up on that also results in a major mistake. The example listed here is ihdina and ahdina. Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Someone can end up reciting it, ahdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. That would end up being a major mistake. Now another common harakat mistake that's made is إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ اهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمَ صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ. An'amta. So what's the first letter in an'amta? Hamza, right? So we know what Hamza and Alif, they're separate, but a lot of times we make this mistake. But we know exactly what it is. We know it's Hamza, but sometimes we make that slip. Alif is different. Alif's makhraj is also different, but they look the same, and sometimes we interchangeably use the same word for both. Hamza. What's the second letter in an'amta? Noon. What's on the noon? Jazm, sukoon. So it's sakin. Who said you said sakin, right? So the letter becomes sakin by having a sukoon on it. So what happens is when we're reciting, especially when we're reciting quickly and trying to speed through it, instead of saying an'amta, we say an'amta. Try to recite it to yourself right now. Sirata alladhina an'amta. Right? Incorrectly, we end up saying that. We kind of bounce on the noon, giving it some sort of qalqala or making it seem as if it has a fatha. That would be a major mistake because you're changing the sukoon into a fatha. So you have to land on it. There's a set of 5 letters. Lin Umar, Lam, Noon, Ain, Mim, Ra. When you land on them with the sukoon, you kind of have to take your time and slowly absorb the letter, or else you'll end up bouncing on it in an odd way or giving it some sort of haraka. So instead of saying an'amta, an'amta, an'amta. Okay, and there's a meme as well that comes, right? An'amta. So don't say an'amata, an'amta. This would be considered a major mistake if this is made. May Allah protect. And again, only through practice. وَلَيْسَ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ تَرْكِهِ إِلَّا رِيَاضَةٍ مِّن بِفَكِّهِ. As Imam Jazari states, that the only way that you can, the only thing in between you and applying tajweed is practicing with the mouth, with the teeth, with the tongue, with your lips. Okay, so this lahan jali, and lahan jali is haram and a major sin. Lahan khafi. Lahan khafi is a minor mistake. So the things listed here, these are all examples. This is not the definition of a lahan khafi. Lahan khafi occurs when any rules that are in place to beautify the Quran, those are not applied. Any rule to beautify the recitation of the Quran, when that's not applied, that's when lahan khafi occurs. And these are all examples of that. The first example is what? The first example is of ra. Empty mouth or full mouth. So ra, maybe tomorrow we won't have this workshop because you'll have the zakat workshop. On Monday we'll actually cover ra, because ra can be pronounced in different ways. So there's this concept called tafkhim. Tafkhim means you recite a letter with a full mouth. So it seems kind of heavy, ra. Okay? Then there's another way of pronouncing ra, which is called tarqiq. Tarqiq is reciting it with an empty mouth, softer voice. So when ra has a kasra, you would pronounce it as ri or ri. Who says the first? Ri. Who says ri? No one. Ri? Yes, I vote for ri, right? It's tarqiq, it's soft. But when it has a fatha or a dhamma, you pronounce it with a full mouth, ra. You don't say ra. You don't say rabbana, you say rabbana, right? So reciting ra with an empty mouth, reciting it ra instead of ra, that would be a lahan khafi. Okay, this is also a common mistake that occurs, and those who are Urdu speaking especially make it, because I think in Urdu maybe we pronounce ra always in a soft way. So sometimes that carries over. So again, practice makes perfect. Another example that's listed is lam. Lam is always tafkhim or tarqiq. It depends. Okay, majority of the times is lam tafkhim. Is it mufakham or is it muraqqaq? Is it full mouth or empty mouth? Majority of the time. It's empty mouth, right? Full mouth or empty mouth? It's empty mouth, majority of the time. What's the one exception where lam is going to be a full mouth, where you're going to say la instead of la? Allah, Allah, lafzul jalala, right? So we'll cover that as well. So when you're saying Allah, you're supposed to say it with a full mouth, that lam. You don't say Allah, okay? Except in the case when the lam of Allah, in the word Allah, is preceded by a kasra, and the example here is Bismillah. So you don't say Bismillah. It even sounds odd. Bismillah, that would be a lahan khafi. You're supposed to pronounce that lam softly, but when the lam of Allah is preceded by a fatha or a dhamma, then you pronounce it with a full mouth. Allah, wallah, tallah. Okay? And all other lams are going to be empty mouth. They're going to be muraqqaq. They're going to be tarqiq. Okay? So if you're going to say no in Arabic, you don't say la, you say la. Correct? And all other pronunciations of lam, with fatha, dhamma, kasra, other than lafzul jalala, other than the word Allah, is always pronounced soft. Any mistake in that is a lahan khafi, is a minor mistake. Another example given is to make ghunna, a nasal sound on noon, sakin, and tanween. So what's sakin? If a letter is sakin, what does it have? A sukoon, a jazm. There's a whole set of rules for when a noon has a sukoon. And there's a whole set of rules when a meme has a sukoon as well. And those rules, inshallah, we'll cover later. But in many instances, when a noon has when it's an ikhfa letter, or let's make it simple. When a noon has a Tashdid, when it has a shadda, you know the small W that hangs up on top of the letter. Whenever you see that on a meme or on a noon, you're supposed to apply what is called a ghunna. A ghunna is a nasal sound with a stretch. So for example, inna, inna. So you feel the nasal sound and you notice the stretch, inna. Now try this. Shut your nose, not too long, make sure you're breathing, and then try to say inna without letting go. Anyone able to say it? Probably not. Did you feel a lot of pressure and vibration in your nose? That's ghunna. That's the ghunna. So you're constricting it, you're blocking it, so you're not able to say the noon and meme properly. Try it with amma. Amma. Not able to, right? You feel all this pressure and it tickles your nose, and so that's called ghunna. So the ghunna is supposed to be applied. And there's different ways of applying ghunna. For example, in the concept of ikhfa, you're supposed to recite the ghunna in a different way. For example, anta, anta, the example here. Anta, that ghunna with the ikhfa sound, again, you're using your nostrils. It's called the khayshum, the nostrils, in order to pronounce his ghunna. So that is also a minor mistake if it occurs. Okay. We already know this, fatha, kasra, dhamma, and sukoon. But one thing I do want to mention, these are the vowels, right? The fatha, dhamma, kasra, zabar, zir, pesh, and what is it? Jazam, right? Jazam is also actually used in Arabic as well, right? Jazam and sukoon. And then in Urdu, people say zabar, zir, pesh. Fatha, dhamma, kasra, or fatha, kasra, dhamma. Now, a common mistake that's made, and if this mistake is fixed, your recitation will become so much more beautiful. It's a very simple fix. Fatha is a, kasra is e, dhamma is u. So first and foremost, these are short vowels. It's not a, e, u. Rather, it's a, e, u. The mistake that's often made is in kasra and dhamma. So in kasra, instead of saying e, we end up saying e sometimes. Right? So Bismillah. You notice that, right? Bismillah. I'm exaggerating a bit so we can catch it. Bismillah versus Bismillah. Bismillah versus Bismillah. You need that flexibility of the mouth and kind of expanding it, making it wide, exercising it in order to get that. Bismillah. A-I-U. A-I-U versus A-E-O. Okay? So O, no. U. Not E. Okay? So if you fix that, and you just have to sit and practice it. I would be taking the train to downtown for college, and I'd just be sitting there and practicing. I wouldn't care who's sitting next to me. If they found it odd, most people would ask, what are you doing? What is that small book that you have? I'd be like, oh, this is the Quran. It's our holy book. And what are you doing? I'm practicing its recital. So once I remember I actually was doing that, and the guy next to me kept looking at me, and I was hoping he would ask. And he kept looking, and then finally he took out his Bible and started reading. He's like, I got my own stuff, right? So, khair. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Maybe his tajweed of translation of Bible. So very easy fix. Your recitation, you'll notice, will get so much more beautiful just by fixing a, I, u. Okay? Now, there's no slides on this. You must be wondering, why are the teeth, is this like a biology slide, you know? No, this is actually part of Tajweed. I never learned the anatomy of the teeth in biology. I actually learned it in Tajweed class, because learning the makharij, you need to know this. But we won't go into this. Instead, before we actually go into the reading, I want to go over a few Tajweed rules regarding isti'ada and basmala, saying A'udhu Billah in Bismillah. And there's no slides on this, so I'll just need your attention. Whenever someone is commencing the recitation of the Quran, it is necessary to recite isti'ada. It is necessary to say A'udhu Billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Whether you're starting at the beginning of a surah or in the middle of a surah, if you are starting the recitation of the Quran, you must say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Okay, point number one. Point number two, Basmala refers to Bismillahi, rahmani, rahim. Okay? So if a person is reciting the Quran and they're starting from the beginning of a surah, it is necessary to also recite Bismillahi rahmani rahim. Okay? If you're starting from the beginning of a surah, it is necessary to also recite Bismillahi rahmani rahim. Okay. Now question, give me an example of when only A'udhu Billah is necessary, but Bismillah is not necessary. Sorry? Surah Tawbah. Oh, you tricked me. Okay, Surah Tawbah, we'll get to that. Other than Surah Tawbah.
If you leave the Quran stop in the middle of the surah,
okay.
and if you want to restart it,
Yes.
you have to
Perfect. Thank you, Uncle. You started reading, let's say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmani Rahim, then you took a break because you're running out of breath, maybe, I don't know, took a sip of water after iftar, and then you're like, let me commence. Now, you have to say A'udhu Billah, but you don't have to say Bismillah. You can say A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim, Maliki Yawmiddini Iyyaka Na'budu. Get it? No. Definitely not. If you wish to say Bismillah along with that, so you say A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka Na'budu. That is actually recommended. You are recommended to say Bismillah all the time. But when you're at the start of a surah, you must say it. There's no choice there. Okay? Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's a good habit to always keep both of them as part of your recital. If you happen, because sometimes you'll hear even reciters, they'll skip Bismillah. If they're reciting from the middle of a surah, they'll recite A'udhu Billah, and then they'll begin the recitation. So that's acceptable if it's from the middle of a surah. If it's from the start of the surah, both are necessary. Now, it's also sunnah to recite Bismillah before beginning any other task, right? Any other important task. Kullu amrin dhi balin. Every matter of some significance or importance, if it's begun without saying Bismillah, fahuwa aqta' and fahuwa abtar. It is cut off. That task that you're undertaking, it will be cut off. Cut off from what? Barakah. Barakah and help of Allah, and it will be left incomplete. It will be left incomplete. And there's another hadith which actually says you should also say Alhamdulillah. If you don't start any matter of importance with Alhamdulillah, then that matter will be left incomplete and without barakah. However, it's not sunnah to recite isti'adha when you're beginning any task. It's actually Bismillah, that's Bismillah and Alhamdulillah, that's the sunnah. Isti'adha you can use for other things. For example, the hadith says that when you're angry, that means, shaitan is basically running through your blood. So in order to repel shaitan and to cool down from your anger, you recite A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim. Now let's say you're reciting the Quran, okay? So I'm reciting the Quran, and then I get a phone call. So I close the Quran and I pick up, I answer the call and I say, don't disturb me, I'm reciting the Quran. And I hang up and then I continue. What do I need to recite? A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim. Now, let's say I'm reciting, okay? And let's assume this is after iftar, and I'm reciting, and I get thirsty, and I pick up a cup of water, and I drink. Do I need to recite A'udhu Billah if I want to continue? Yes, I do. So definitely if I take a sip and take a bite of something, then if you eat or drink in between your recital, you must restart with A'udhu Billah. What if someone says salam to you while you're reciting? Do you need to respond to their salam? Because generally, if someone says assalamu alaikum, it's wajib for us to respond with wa alaikum assalam. What if you're reciting Quran and someone says salam? Do you need to respond? Is it necessary? No. That's why when we see someone sitting and reciting the Quran and they're engaged and they're focused, we should try to hold off our salam as to not inconvenience him or her. If you go ahead and do say wa alaikum assalam, while you're reciting, someone says salam to you and you say wa alaikum assalam, then you do need to recite A'udhu Billah and then continue. Okay? And now, let's say myself, inshallah, I'll be reading and then I'll be explaining things. Or there's a mufassir who is explaining the meanings of the Quran while he's reciting, and then he stops, gives the meaning, the translation, and then he continues. Does he need to re-recite A'udhu Billah? No. Why? Because any talk, any conversation that's related to the Quran does not necessitate the restart of the Quran with A'udhu Billah. Okay? Yeah.
What if like you're reciting, you memorize it to a person, he stops you, and he says, no, this is wrong, this is the actual ayah. You have to say, okay, start again.
Yeah, so the question is, you're reciting to someone, let's say a hafiz or a non-hafiz, they're reciting, getting tested, and then the person corrects him. Is that what you're saying? Does he need to restart with A'udhu Billah? No.
Even if there's like English, like he says like, no, this is not right, and then he says the ayah.
Yes, he doesn't need to restart A'udhu Billah. Why? Because what he'll be correcting you with, even though it's in English, he's saying, no, that's not the ayah. No, this is incorrect. Recite like this. That talk is all related to the Quran, right? Because even a mufassir, when he's saying Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen means such and such, and then he continues, he's speaking English, but it's all related to the topic of the Quran. So when you talk about anything other than the Quran in between your recital, restart with A'udhu Billah. Okay? So, yes. Yeah. No, that's actually it's funny because he's mentioning about sneezing, coughing, or just like catching your breath. There's actually a type of waqf listed in Tajwid books. It's an unplanned stop, and coughing and sneezing comes under that. As far as I know, no, you don't need to restart with A'udhu Billah, Bismillah. I would definitely check with one of our more experienced scholars on that. But as far as I remember from what I learned, no, you don't need to restart with A'udhu Billah, Bismillah in that case. Okay? So now, we're going to actually recite. Does everyone have a mushaf? So it's good if you have your mushaf, you can also follow along over here, because I will be pulling it up. Okay, how was it? Okay, Bismillah. Is this large enough, or should I make it a little larger? Is it okay? Sorry. The Surah Fatiha. So a few tips before we actually recite. Steps for clarity. Number one, have the intention that you're actually fixing your recitation of Allah, fixing your recitation of the Quran, which is the Kalam of Allah. Inshallah, there will be much barakah in that. You're seeking to increase your knowledge of the Quran and its recitation. Number two, there's no shyness. A lot of times when you're practicing, it's really weird because you just sit there and you go, Lord, Lord, Lord. It's like, what's wrong with this guy? Why does he keep saying this weird sound? It seems embarrassing, but it's actually not. It's actually rewarding because this is how we actually practice. So get rid of that sort of hesitation and shyness. Number three, open your mouth flexibly and wide. Flexibly and wide. When you're actually reciting, let's say in front of someone or to yourself, you're supposed to relax your mouth and make it more natural. But for the sake of practice, making it wide and flexible and sometimes exaggerating something a bit is for the sake of practice, and it'll be beneficial. Number four, this is the part that people won't like. Lose the tone. The tone and the tune, lose that, because sometimes that becomes a hindrance in you fixing your tajweed. So your tone and your tune, put that to the side. Let's focus on the tajweed, and then once we have that down, then you start making it more melodious, or add some tone and tune to it. Ji? This point. So when we're practicing the recitation of these verses, we should not be too concerned about our voice and the lahan, the tune by which we are reciting. We should make it as simple as possible so that it helps us in fixing our tajweed, right? So the embellishing of the Quran with our voice and our tune, that we should do it secondarily. Right now, let's focus on just fixing the letters and the rules, okay? Number five, yes? What do you mean? Oh, okay. All right. Do you guys want it large? Whoa. Is this large enough or a little larger? It's fine? As long as everyone can see. If not, then I'll make it larger, inshallah. Sorry. The fifth point is harakat clarity, which we already talked about. A, I, U. Okay? Sixth point, which we mentioned yesterday, is each letter is distinct. It has its own identity, it has its own origin, its own makhraj, and it has its own qualities. So as we read through, I will talk about the qualities of some of these letters. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Bismillahi rahmani rahim. So again, Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I heard Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Okay, so ni. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So let's practice on that kasra. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdu, ha. Ha different from ha. So there are 6 letters that are pronounced from the throat. Okay, and the throat is divided into 3 sections. The lowest, or the furthest I should say, and the middle, and then the one closest to the chest, the mouth, sorry. So the bottom is Hamza Ha. So say Ha. The middle is Ain and Ha. So say Ha, and then the top 2 are Ghain and Kha. So the difference between Ha and Ha, let's practice that. Ha is from down here, closer to the chest, and then Ha. Ha, 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 ha. So the makhraj changes. Makhraj changes. So if you recite it as alhamdu, you're reciting it from here. Alhamdu, which would be lahan jali or lahan khafi. Lahan jali. Major mistake or minor mistake? Major mistake, because you're changing the ha into a ha. Again, like I said yesterday, it's like changing a M into an O. Like a complete change of letter. These are 2 very different letters. Alhamdu versus alhamdu. So, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Another common mistake that's made is, you see this end? What's that last letter? Noon. So when we're ending a word at the end of an ayah, we sometimes leave out that last letter. So you say, and some you won't even notice. You'll notice now because I said it, but here. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I didn't say the noon. My makhraj of noon was not pronounced. Right? You caught it now because I gave you a warning in advance, but in Taraweeh and stuff especially, the Imam, if he skips it, you won't realize it. Or sometimes if he recites it, you won't realize it, only the Imam will know. So it's his responsibility to recite every letter properly, right? So I'm going to recite it incorrectly and then correctly. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I skipped the noon. Now the correct one. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I hit my tongue to the part where the noon is pronounced from. I got its makhraj. So keep that in mind. Next ayah as well. Ar-Rahmani Rahim. Ha, focus on the ha. Ar-Rahmani Rahim. So good. The ha was better, and definitely the meme was pronounced. Okay. Maliki yawmiddin. One more time. Maliki yawmiddin. So I will point out two things right now. One is this letter is what? Kaf. Sorry, I was shaking and everything. And it has a kasra. And a kasra is a short vowel. A lot of times people end up reciting it as Maliki yawmiddin. This would be a major mistake or a minor? Major mistake. Why? Which letter did I add? Ya. I added a ya to the kaf. Right? So some people caught that, some didn't. Again, I'll recite it incorrectly. Notice the kaf, I end up stretching it a bit. Maliki yawmiddin. Major mistake. You're adding a whole nother letter. It should be Maliki yawmiddin. Let's try. One more time. Maliki yawmiddin. Next thing, you see this? Deen, ad-deen. This is a little tough, a little difficult, but it will be beneficial. Inshallah, if you're not able to do it now and practice now, at least you'll have this in mind and you can work on it later. So we talked about ghunna, correct? We talked about ghunna. Ghunna is usually associated with noon or meme, but sometimes it kind of slips in and makes its way where it's not supposed to. This is one prime example, ad-deen. Even the first ayah, alameen, when you're doing the deen part, ad-deen, that E part, sometimes we end up using our nostril for it. And one of the reasons why is because it's actually easier, it takes less energy to use your nose than it does to use your mouth. So let me demonstrate what I'm talking about. Maliki yawmiddin. You hear the ghunna, right? I overdid it just so you can notice it. I'll do it again. Maliki yawmiddin. There's ghunna there. It's not supposed to be. Okay? So I'm going to now shut my nose and do it. Maliki yawmiddin. You hear? You hear the nasal sound? That's incorrect. There's no nasal sound in that E part. So you're supposed to recite it without any nasal sound. So I'll recite it correctly now. Maliki yawmiddin. So a way to test whether or not I'm saying it correctly is during that stretch it a little longer for the sake of practice, and then shut your nose and see if there's any vibration. Maliki yawmiddin. So try it on your own. Now try it again, but when you're saying the een part, stretch it just for the sake of practice, but then shut your nose. If you feel some sort of vibration and pressure, that means you're squeezing in a ghunna accidentally without realizing it. So go ahead. So it's a bit harder to pronounce without that ghunna because we get so used to it. And a lot of times you'll hear people reciting the Quran, the entire recitation will be full of ghunna. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Right? That's incorrect. And it actually hurts the ears, especially if the speaker system is very good like this place. It actually begins to hurt the ears, that ghunna sound, because the ghunna is only supposed to come at certain times. So inshallah, we'll keep that in mind. That you have to practice a lot. Ji. Yeah, so number one, if you have a teacher, he'll help you. I'm showing you these like few little tricks that you can practice on your way, to downtown on the train with all these people staring at you. So, pressing the nose for the ghunna, that's a good test, right? And then the a, I, u, for example, that's a little hard. You need someone else to do it, but you just have to keep stay focused and try to see, am I reciting it as Maliki yawmiddin or Maliki yawmiddin, right? So again, best is always with the teacher, right? Always with the teacher. Again, I was a hafiz of Quran. I was leading Taraweeh. I thought everything was fine and dandy until I went to a party and recited, and he took mistakes out. That reminds me, 4 years ago, in Detroit, There was a Qari he's from Syria. Unfortunately, because of all the trouble there, may Allah alleviate the difficulties of the Muslims there and all around the world. He has moved to Turkey. Sheikh Salah al-Kurdi. Sheikh Salah al-Kurdi. He's actually from the family of the great saint, rahimahullah, Sheikh Abdurrahman Shaghuri. As far as I know, he's from his family. Sheikh Abdurrahman Shaghuri's Sheikh, he's from his family, Sheikh Salah al-Kurdi. He's a munshid, he recites nasheeds, and he's a qari. So he was in Detroit. So I said, can I recite Surah Fatiha to you? This is only 4 years ago, by the way. Can I recite Surah Fatiha to you and you take out my mistakes? And he's like, sure, that's my job. Okay, he was happy. So I sat down with him for about 20 minutes in a public setting, and I recited, and he took out, mashallah, very subtle mistakes. And one of the mistakes that he took out was, you see this Rabbil Alameen? Rabb. The Ra is full mouth or heavy or empty mouth? Full mouth. The Ba, is it full mouth? 10-minute warning. So, okay. Is the Ba full mouth or empty mouth? Empty mouth. So what happens though is because you're connecting the Ra and the Ba, you end up making the Ba heavy when you land on it. You make it full when you land on it. So let me recite it incorrectly. Rabbil. Incorrect. He said no, when you land on the Ba, make the Ba soft. Rabbil. Very subtle, very subtle. Only a teacher can point this out. Right? So may Allah reward him. I will never forget. Every time and Surah Fatiha is you're reciting in Salah every day so many times. He taught me that one thing, along with a few other things, and he'll be getting the reward. He doesn't even remember me probably, right? That's why it's so important to engage in learning and teaching and spreading the deen, because you'll do a deed and you'll forget about it, and then in the akhirah Allah will remind you, remember this deed that you did? You forgot about it? The effects of that were ongoing. Here's all your reward. Sadaqah jariyah. Okay? Let's continue with, so to answer your question, you need a teacher. And if you're not able to find the teacher immediately, listen to a few qurra. I'll mention their names multiple times later on as well, tomorrow or the day after. Sheikh Husari, Husary. Sheikh Khalil Ahmad Husari or Khalil Mahmud Husari, rahimahullah. Husary. You can look him up on YouTube. His entire Quran is uploaded with decent quality audio. He was from Egypt, passed away in 70s or 80s. Everyone accepts him to be one of the best qurra of recent times, the best, above Qari Abdul Basit. Okay, so he's very good. He's very slow and quote unquote boring, na'udhu billah, right? I had the opportunity to teach Quran, and I would assign my students to listen to Sheikh Khalil Husari, and they would find him so slow and so plain and simple, but it had immediate effects on them. And then sometimes they would kind of change the audio in a sneaky fashion and listen to some other qurra, and then they would come recite to me. I would know right away, you listened to a different qari, didn't you? You listened to Sheikh Shuraim, didn't you? And he'd be like, sorry, Hafiz Sab, yeah, I did. Like, I'm guilty. MashaAllah, right? Their guilt was listening to the wrong qari, MashaAllah. Innocent children. So listening to Sheikh Husari will improve your tajweed within days. Okay, especially the younger you are, the easier it will be. Okay, and if you want a bit faster recitation with a nicer tune, then the current Imam in Medina Munawwara, Sheikh Ahmad Talib Hamid. Sheikh Ahmad Talib Hamid. You can look up his audio. He also mashallah is very good and very precise with his tajweed. Covers all the subtle points, but he has more of a tune and a nicer voice. Sometimes it's more enjoyable to listen to that. Inshallah, you can use those individuals. Ahmad Talib Hamid and definitely Sheikh Husari. Listen to these two individuals. Let's continue. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. The ya has a shadda. So don't say iyaka. Iyaka. Come upon it and then come off. Iyaka. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. And na'budu, make sure you don't say na'budu. If you say na'budu, is that a minor mistake or a major mistake? Major, because you end up adding a waw. So إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Very quickly, Sad. See the Sad of Sirat? How do you distinguish the recitation of Sad from Sin? They actually have the same makhraj. The makhraj of Sad, Sin, and as well as I had spoken with you, right? Za. The tip of the tongue touches the lower central incisors as well as the upper ones. So these are the central incisors, the front two teeth, top and bottom. So the tip of the tongue touches these, right? Just say S, right? S, z, z, right? Now, how do you distinguish between Sin and Sad? Ji? Yes, Sad is heavy. Why is it heavy? Because it has two characteristics called isti'la and itbaq. Sad, in order to pronounce it properly and heavy, as Uncle said, is that the major portion of the back of your tongue, it rises towards your palate. Sad. The back of your tongue, a major portion of it, it rises upwards towards the palate. Sad. Also, the middle part of your tongue not only rises, but it actually touches your palate. The middle part of your tongue rises and touches the palate, and the back part rises but doesn't really touch. Sad. Saw. 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 Versus Seen, where your tongue, back and the middle, remains down. Yeah, you feel it? Seen. Versus saw. Right? They have the same makhraj, but simply because of isti'la and itbaq, the entire letter changes. Right? The entire letter changes. Okay, so that's the way to distinguish between sad and seen. When it comes to qaf, some people will pronounce it mustaqim, some people will pronounce it mustaqim. Right? Both of them are incorrect because kha is a different letter and kaf is a different letter. Qaf, how do you pronounce qaf? The back of the tongue, the extreme back of the tongue actually touches the palate. Qaf, qaf, extreme back of the tongue touches the palate. Try it. Qaf, okay? Versus kaf. Kaf, it's the middle part. Yeah, the center of the tongue, the middle part of the tongue, that's what touches the palate. Kaf. Right? The middle part of the tongue touches the palate for kaf. Whereas qaf, the back part, extreme back. Ka versus qa. Okay? So make sure you distinguish between that. Kha is, you know why people make mistake with kha? Kha is part of the throat but closest to the mouth, right? So it's like on that border of your throat and the mouth, kha. And qaf is the extreme back of the tongue, which is basically the last boundary for your mouth before you go into the throat. So qaf and kha, they're also very close in their makhraj. So maybe that's why people end up making the mistake. Instead of saying qaf, they go too far back into the throat and then end up saying kha. And if you come too much into the mouth, then the middle of your tongue touches the palate and you end up saying ka. Ji. The qaf, you'll feel it. You'll feel like towards your throat, close to your throat. It's actually the back of your tongue touching the palate. You'll feel it. The echo, I'm not sure if you're talking about qalqala. Well, qaf has a quality called qalqala, in which there is this echoing, bouncing sound within it. And there's actually a discussion. There's qaf, ta, ba, jim, dal. These are the letters in which there's qalqala. But some of the linguists say that the true qalqala is only in qaf. The other letters also had, but the true qalqala is only in qaf. It's like intrinsically part of qaf. The qalqala. So maybe that's what you're talking about, that sort of bouncing, echoing sound. Mustaqim, yeah. Okay, maybe, inshallah. You can practice it and then, but the way you're reciting it seems accurate. Mustaqim, right? Okay. Next ayah. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم أنعمت أنعمت صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. So when you're saying ولا الضالين, make sure your string with the hook, you throw it onto the lam. ضالين. Yeah, so don't separate the two because there's a shadda on the lam. So you're supposed to land on the lam from the dad. Okay? So don't say wala dhalin. Don't separate the two in that sense. They have a connection because there's a shadda there. Wala dhalin. So dad is a very famous letter because this will be the last point and then we'll end. Dad, one of my teachers told me that Arabs were actually called an-natiquna bid-dad, those who express themselves with the letter dad. That was, Arabic speakers were actually called that. Why? Because the letter dad doesn't seem to exist in any other language. The letter dad doesn't seem to exist in any other language. So there's this intrigue with the letter dad. Dad is pronounced, and this is hard because no other language has it. Whether you speak Urdu, Gujarati, Turkish, Swahili, Chinese, whatever language, you won't come across dad. Dad, the upturned side edge of your tongue, either the left or the right, the upturned side edge of the tongue touches the roots of your molars and the premolars. Your molars and your premolars. The side edge of the tongue on the side, right or left, will touch the edge, the root of your molars and premolars. So dad. Your face will kind of orient itself in a weird way. Dad. So linguists say that most people find it easy to do it from the left. I personally do it from the right, whatever you're comfortable with. And again, talking about the intrigue of the letter dad, it's actually written in history books that Umar radiallahu anhu was able to pronounce dad from both sides, right? This intrigue with not only the personality of someone like Umar radiallahu anhu, but also his pronunciation of dad. He was able to pronounce from the left and the right, right? Usually people pronounce from the left or the right. He was able to do it from both. So that's just an interesting tidbit. But again, so dad, right? Dad. That's the makhraj. There's no other letter that shares that makhraj. So you shouldn't be getting confused with dal or ta or ta when it comes to dad, because dad's makhraj is very different. Dad also has two qualities of itbaq and isti'la, where the extreme back of the tongue, it rises and touches the palate, and the center of the tongue, the extreme back of the tongue rises towards the palate, and then the middle of the tongue actually touches and meets with the palate. Right? That's why it's heavy. Whenever you have the tongue going upwards, the letter will be heavy. Dad, ta, la, sad. Okay, these are the heaviest letters, and dad is one of them. But the pronunciation of dad, the side edge of your tongue, touching the roots of your molars and premolars. So let's recite this ayah one more time, and then we'll conclude, inshallah. After recitation of this one ayah, one last point, and then we'll conclude. Small little tidbit for everyone, Inshallah, it'll be refreshing. Ji. Ji. So a very common mistake, wala zallin. Wala zallin would be a major mistake. Ji. It's a common mistake amongst those from the Indian subcontinent. Because again, law, you have to practice. It's not easy. It doesn't exist in Urdu nor in any other language. So, wala zallin, that would be a major mistake. Okay? So, ji, ji. Thank you for pointing that out. Maghzubi, right? Maghzubi and wala zallin. These are major mistakes. I'm sorry? Ji. 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 Very common mistake. Ji. Thank you for pointing that out. So,
They are not doing by mistake, but they unintentionally they call God as a God.
Ji. No, what happened? Ji. Well, intentionally meaning they probably think it's actually pronounced that way, but it's actually not. And once you've learned it the wrong way, it's really hard to fix it later. So you should just try your best, and if you're not able to, again, you're getting for your effort, you're getting the reward for your recital and effort. Now, if someone purposely knows it's maghlubi alayhim waladdallin, and they're like, you know what, I'm still going to recite it the way I want to. That is plain and simple. It's sinful. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's I would assume that most people just learned it incorrectly, but I don't think there's any denial, unless someone is not a qari. If there's a qari, a proper certified qari with ijaza, he'll definitely tell you it's غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين, not maghzubi and ولا الضالين. Ji. Okay, is that it? Okay. Oh, it looks the same as well. Okay. I see. Probably that's the same issue with qaf and all that as well, right? Probably qaf, does it exist in Urdu alphabet, qaf? But is it pronounced qaf? It is pronounced qaf? Okay, so I guess dad is the exception. So the uncle was saying, very important point, you mentioned it as well, the Urdu language has the letter dad in it, in script, but its pronunciation is as zad, right? So that's where the mistake carries over. Alhamdulillah, we're able to identify where the mistake comes from. That in itself is a blessing. But now, alhamdulillah, we know, since we identified where the mistake comes from, we should work on, inshallah, fixing it. Okay, so inshallah, that's we'll do Nas, Falaq, and Qul Huwallahu Ahad. Not tomorrow, you'll be in Zakat workshop. On Monday, inshallah, we'll do Nas, Falaq, and Qul Huwallahu Ahad, inshallah. But it's very important to fix our Fatiha, and inshallah, we can practice this. Okay, and the last thing that I said I would leave everyone with is, if we're learning Tajweed, we want to build a connection with the Quran, right? So one of the things that really breaks our connection with the Quran is engagement with the listening of music. So Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, he writes in his Fatawa that music, those who become very much engrossed and engaged with music, not only playing, but also listening to it all the time, your heart doesn't have space for both music and the Quran. Okay, so if music is coming into your heart, music and lyrics, then the Quran begins to seep out, and you're intrinsically you begin to appreciate music and poetry more. And when it comes to the Quran, your interest is not really there. So one of the ways by which we can measure where we are is that if we listen to music, if we hear clapping, drums, and lyrics, our ears, do they become more attentive? Versus when the Quran is being recited. When the Quran is being recited, is our heart and our mind as attentive as it was when the music was playing? Okay? This is just one harm, a major harm of listening to music, where it disconnects us from the Quran. That pleasure and that enjoyment that we can find in the Quran, music will completely eradicate that, which is very problematic for our dunya and our akhirah. Okay? That's just one harm of music. So we're here in the masjid, we could have been doing anything else. Some of us are in i'tikaf, some of us are not in i'tikaf. We should make this niyyah that, you know what, once and for all, we're going to get rid of music from our lives. And due to all the harms associated with it, many fuqaha say is actually, majority of the fuqaha say is actually impermissible regardless. And even whatever difference of opinion someone wants to ask about, the music of today with all the, you know, illicit love lyrics, gang banging, shooting, violence, womanizing, that's in music, that everyone agrees, that's completely impermissible, right? So we should make that intention now. And it's hard to get rid of music, right? When in the past, when there was in the Muslim world, when there was someone who was addicted to alcohol, one of the ways by which they would veer him off of alcohol is saying that, hey, get him onto music. It's less of a harm than alcohol. But music also has that addictive trait. So get him addicted to music, that will take him slowly off of alcohol, right? So what I'm trying to say is that music is it's very hard to get rid of, right? So you have to work at it, but nothing is impossible for Allah. And we're in the month of Ramadan, last 10 days, we're sitting in the masjid, some of us are in i'tikaf. Beg Allah in your du'as that, Ya Allah, this love and attachment to music, please remove it from my life. And rather, instead, attach my heart, my entire being to your kalam, to the Quran, inshallah. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.